Reformer movement library, and today we're going to be talking about any high plank variations that you might want to do on your Reformer. High plank is such a fantastic move, and I'm sure you see it all over the internet and in a lot of your classes. There's various variations that we can do on the Reformer, and it's all about understanding where the challenge is. So I'm going to be on a medium to light spring. So on my fold, it is a green spring. However, the lighter the spring, the more challenge you will have. So go ahead and pop yourself onto your lightest spring possible if you want maximum challenge. And if you feel like that's a bit much, go just one setting above. You don't want it to be too heavy because you are reliant on the carriage moving. Now, the biggest thing to understand is whether or not the load is going through the carriage or the platform. So our most basic and slightly more manageable one, I won't say easy because none of them are easy, is when our hands are on either the platform or of course the foot bar. Today I'm going to be working on the platform so that you can really understand everything, and then we'll worry about what changes when we're working on the foot bar instead. So working on the platform, I'm going to get my hands down onto the platform and I'm going to set up as I would for a hover on the floor or on the mat. So I'm going to get my hands into a good position and my shoulders aligned over my hands. And this is where a lot of people make their mistakes, because you set yourself up with your weight behind your hands. If your hands are going to be bearing weight, you need to be on top. A good way to think about this is that the hands, we often hear the term hands underneath shoulders, but many of us think of our shoulders as the top of our shoulder. So we align here. As you can see, my arm now goes up. Okay, so that's unideal. I like to say hands underneath chest, and depending on who's in front of me, I really encourage them to line up with their actual chest. Okay, that's a great way to know, okay, now I'm all the way over. You are going to feel a bit more strain into your arms, but that is the correct alignment. The second mistake that I see many people make is they feel like their feet should be against the shoulder pads no matter what. Every Reformer is a slightly different size and every human being is a slightly different height. If you are quite tall, then yes, you're going to be very comfortable with your feet against the shoulder pad. But even me at 5'10", I need to bring my feet in a little bit more, okay? So never feel like your feet have to be against the shoulder pads. So I'm going to bring my knees underneath my hips. So the first thing I align, shoulders. Then I align my knees underneath my hips and my feet land where my feet land. That's why I'm wearing grip socks. They're going to stay where they need to stay. We're then going to think about our neutral spine, draw those ribs together and lift the knees. Now I'm in my hover. Now the challenge here is that I extend the legs and bring them back in with control. Notice how my upper body doesn't move. Why? Because my lower body is on the Reformer. So that is how we start off, with our arms on the stable bit and our legs doing the motion. Now we can flip that around. So now my legs are stable and my arms are going to move. This is more difficult because it requires a lot more shoulder and rib torso connection. And this is often where a lot of us are actually lacking our strength. Okay, our legs, all they're doing is pushing away and coming in, and the bulk of our body is staying stable in variation 1. In variation 2, the bulk of our body is moving while our legs stay stable. We will always set up from the platform first. So if that's where my feet are, nice and comfortably, I then get my hips over my knees and my hands then land underneath my chest. Exactly the same. I'm then going to lift the knees, still straighten the legs to move, but this time I'm not only straightening and bending my legs, I'm responsible for keeping my hands directly underneath my chest. Excellent, and coming down. Now, when we are facing the back of the Reformer, we have an additional layer that we can add, which is shoulder flexion, okay? So making sure that I do this purposefully and not by accident is the most important part of working this movement. I'm going to start in my hover position. We know by now, hands underneath chest, knees underneath hips, hover. The legs extend. I'm still in hands underneath chest, neutral spine. I then take the challenge a bit further by purposefully flexing my shoulders, pushing that carriage towards the back of the machine. My body has not changed shape. I'm then going to bring my hands back to underneath my weight and then bend my knees in. So that is our fullest version of how we can challenge ourselves in plank. And that can be done in any of the variations. It can be done on your elbows, it can be done with the box so that you're slightly elevated, it can be done when you are on the foot bar as well. What's important is that you understand the angles and the weight distribution. So here we are in perfect box. We extend the legs. We then flex the shoulders, sending that carriage up. We then bring the carriage in. We then bend the legs. Being able to keep it punctuated is absolutely essential so that you're working your body intentionally and not just letting that carriage slide away from you. Going into shoulder flexion is very tricky to control. You do not want it to happen by accident. When it happens by accident, we see this. We see the carriage go and everything collapses and we go completely into that lower back versus keeping those ribs tight and challenging the core with that shoulder flexion. So with that in mind, you can choose what level you want to challenge yourself at when it comes to plank variations. Now let's talk about when we use the foot bar. So if the foot bar is up, we can be using the foot bar with our hands. Now when our hands are on the foot bar, I always encourage you to not wrap your thumb. The moment you've wrapped your thumb, you've locked your shoulders into that alignment, into that slight internal rotation. This is not ideal to load through the shoulder joint. So the moment we untuck that thumb, immediately we're in a little bit more external rotation, a little bit more neutral and a better position for that joint. So we're going to avoid wrapping that thumb. We're going to come into the same setup. Now, again, remember what I said about the shoulder pads. You do not have to have your foot against the shoulder pads. I always encourage people to come towards the front of their carriage, unless they're really, really tall, because that allows us to set our shoulders over, okay? Bar underneath, chest. I then like to encourage lifting the heels. Why do I do this? Because if I keep my foot flat, and I then cue you to push back, I'm going to get to here, and it's really likely that I'm going to start to send my shoulders back as well. This is not your plank on the Reformer. So by cueing people to lift their heels and really load that bar, you then keep the shoulders exactly where they are, you send that carriage away from you, and you should naturally land in that perfect plank on your Reformer, okay? Now from here, I could of course take this into our long stretch, which is when I go into flexion of my shoulders, and then I recover, and then I can come back in, either into pike, or this can come into a little knees in and out, often known and referred to as an icebreaker. Notice how I'm still high on my toes though. I have not dropped my heels until I want to stand, deload my arms, and take a second. We can, of course, use the foot bar when we are facing the back of the carriage as well. This is quite an advanced option in most cases, mainly because the foot bar is a small surface area, meaning it can feel like a lot to get your feet up there, and it can feel pretty unstable. So I always recommend within my classes that in order to get the feet onto the foot bar, we will first push the carriage out, establish the position with the body, and then change the feet. Because as you can imagine, if I asked you to step on the foot bar here, this is very awkward, and the toe is not in the right position to bear my weight. So I've decided that I'm going to do my plank harder, more difficult version with my feet up on the foot bar. First thing I'm going to do is find my plank. Then I'm going to take one foot up at a time and make sure I can extend my legs. Everything else about the plank stays exactly the same. If I wanted to challenge that shoulder flexion while I was here, that's absolutely possible. And there will be a heavier load on my arms as I am now at a slight decline. Bringing that in, I'm going to either put one knee down, or I could have stepped off the bar while I was still out in plank and then come back in. All of these variations can be made easier by adding the box, which then takes you into incline instead of decline. Most important thing is to understand that the carriage is the moving part and the platform or foot bar are stable. So whichever way you're doing your challenge, you need to set up from the stable part and let everything fall into alignment after that. If this is something that you struggle with or something that you need a little bit more help with, make sure to like and subscribe or drop your questions in the comments and I'll be sure to get back to them. This is The Simple Fix, here to make your practice as simple and effective as possible.